Grotesque was once a prince that lived in the underground realm of Subterranea. He is also so hard to kill. His first big fight that we got to see was against the X-Men. Grotesque was the last living member of his kingdom. An earthquake caused by Dr. Hunt destroyed the underground civilization, and of course, one survivor remained, Grotesque. He rightfully guessed that the above world caused the earthquake and came up to avenge his people. He learned of the earthquake machine and decided to use that to destroy the above world. He confronts the X-Men, and the X-Men defeat him because Professor X used his mental power to stop the machine. Frustrated, Grotesque slammed himself into the machine to get it to work again, but that actually caused it to explode. The X-Men thought that the explosion killed him and Professor X. They were wrong. Professor X wasn't actually there. It was actually Changeling that had been pretending to be Professor X under Professor X's command, and well, Grotesque just can't die, so he went on to fight Miss Marvel. She also hit him with something that should have killed him. He survived and fought the Avengers, and then later Thor. In the Thor brawl, there was again a large energy blast that should have killed him, but didn't. Not really. His body was gone, but his spirit remained. His loyal captive followers, the Lava Men, took that spirit and put it in an impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again, this time in San Francisco. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. His spirit was released from the suit and dissolved. With his track record though, I wouldn't be surprised if Grotesque appeared alive in a few years. Pretty Boy is more than just a punk pretty face. He has some pretty cool cybernetic implants that can expand to be 3 times their length. If you don't think he is pretty cool, he can just use his mind control powers to fix that. He gets access to a person's brain using these fiber optic filaments in his eyes. Then he kind of reprograms you. Pretty Boy is known for his affiliation with Donald Pierce. He was a member of the mercenary group Pierce created called the Reavers. While on this team, he passed away for the first time. Big moment in every Marvel character's journey, but like most Marvel heroes and villains, his death did not stick and he was soon back in action. The second passing happened under the leadership of Deathstrike, and he was put 6 feet under by Logan, but again it didn't stick and the guy was back in action brawling against the X-Men. Eventually, by the end of the battle with the X-Men, he was arrested. The character debuted in 1988's Uncanny X-Men 229. A bonus story in Marvel Tales Volume 2, issue 262, featured the X-Men sparring against a pretty interesting group. They were known as the Desert Dwellers. Their leader was Sunstroke. He claimed he was created when a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. I'm assuming the Daystar is the sun. Combining with the sun in this case gave Sunstroke the ability to create and absorb light and heat. The creation of the heat also allows the guy to fly. Sunstroke, like the X-Men, fights with a team, the Desert Dwellers. We'll actually get more into one member in a later video, but for now, there are 3 other things on the team. I say things, not people, because they were a cactus, stone, and lizard made into humanoid villain versions of themselves. Squadcles. The Desert Dwellers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were traveling through the desert. The Desert Dwellers attack the X-Men, but they don't actually care that they attack the X-Men flying plane. They just have been taking down flights for supplies. It's in this fight we learn that Sunstroke needs the sun to activate his powers, so Storm creating clouds made him almost fall from the sky. Honestly, the Desert Dwellers are doing a pretty good job. Wolverine gets chucked into a mountain at one point, but the day is saved when Banshee shows up, screams, and the Desert Dwellers can't handle it, so they retreat. Collective Man is just so interesting to me. The villain is actually 5 people merged into one, specifically 5 brothers from China. When they merge together, they apparently gain a connection to everyone in China. You heard that right. Everybody. The connection allows Collective Man, as the brother mashup is called, to draw on power from any Chinese person they want. Drawing on 10,000 people one time gave the Collective Man enough strength to handle Sasquatch. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. The brothers almost died from absorbing too many people's life forces at one time. I think that's karma right there. The brothers also have another very odd ability. They can make any Chinese person a clone of a brother and then merge with them. They have a hive mind, meaning they can mentally speak to just each other, but if they want to speak the old-fashioned way but are a few miles away from each other, they can just teleport to wherever their brother happens to be. It turns out you may need to prepare for trouble, make it double, as there are no rules when it comes to combining. You don't have to be like 5 brothers in one, you can go 2 brothers together, 3 brothers together, 4, 1, it doesn't matter. You can get different size of the villain persona. The brothers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were in town to look into Zorn. The 5 made it very hard to do so, as they created an army of themselves to attack the X-Men. I just can't believe the brothers merged together and are able to then call on the power of all of China. Okay, so in the Marvel Universe, there is Man-Ape, that is M'Baku, but this ain't about him, even though he is more popular. We are looking at Ape-Man, and also briefly touching on the concept of the Ani-Men. So Ape-Man was a human, Gordon Kiefer, that dressed in an ape suit. He had a pretty iconic start to his career. He tried to rob Stark Industries, obviously failed, and went to jail. But his ape thing worked in his favor. Criminal mastermind, the organizer, was starting something called the Ani-Men, a team made up of other animal or insect-themed villains. Ape-Man was a natural fit for the squad, and so Catman, also a team member, broke him out of jail. There have been many Ani-Men, but the team that started it off and surrounded Ape-Man was him, Catman, Frogman, and Birdman. They fought against the X-Men in X-Men 94. The Ani-Men showed up to take over a military base, and the X-Men said, nope. It's in this comic that it's shown that Count Nefaria did some experimentation on the Ani-Men to make them more like their animal counterparts and significantly less human. Ape-Man becomes way stronger than he used to be. The fight with the X-Men doesn't go well for the heroes at first. The reason? They're too tired. The X-Men get it together though, and in the process, Ape-Man gets to experience Storm's power firsthand. The X-Men do come out on top, which really isn't shocking in the slightest. Ape-Man does meet his end eventually due to an explosion. Bloody Bess, she is a queen, she is a mother, she deserves attention. She is a pirate, and currently little is known about her past. Her present is a different story. The woman is a pirate. She is part of the Crimson Pirates. The Crimson Pirates and the X-Men first went mutant abilities to sword when the pirates were temporary allies with Goth, a shifty guy involved with unethical trading. The allies assisted with releasing someone that really should have stayed in X-Men custody. The X-Men ended up fighting the allies, and of course Bloody Bess and the X-Men were winning, but there was some possession involved and the X-Men were captured. Bloody Bess was in charge of keeping that section of the team in check. The team was taken to this market, and then things went south from there for the pirates. Goth was no more by the end of the battle, and Bess, along with the other pirates, fled. The Crimson Pirates stuck together and worked as kind of like mercs for hire. Bloody Bess, as a pirate, is very, very good at sword fighting, but she also has telepathic powers. She once tried to use the powers to connect with Omega Black for an assignment, but instead let the Shadow King loose. The king possessed her fellow pirates, and they attacked her. She called to Nightcrawler for help. They had a little thing going on. He arrived, the X-Men arrived, the X-Men also then got possessed, and Nightcrawler and Bess had to fight together to save the day. Last we know of Bloody Bess, she has dedicated her days to finding her old pirate friends. All in all, a very cool character on a cool team, and yet she has less than 10 appearances. She debuted in the year 2000, and her last appearance was in 2015, so hopefully she gets picked back up soon. Back when Hank McCoy, Beast, was being recruited by Professor X to join the X-Men, there was another guy who wanted to get Beast on his side. His name was Orlando Furio, and he wanted to conquer the world. He wanted Hank on his side so bad, he kidnapped him and his parents. He used Hank's parents as leverage to get Hank to steal a mini energy reactor. The reactor was used to power a machine that was designed to create global disasters. The good news is the X-Men eventually arrived and made sure the machine would never even once be used, and they freed Hank and his parents. The machine exploded, and the guy, Conquistador, was caught in the destruction and presumably also exploded. He really committed to the bit though, the Conquistador. He carries around a sword designed to look like what the actual Conquistadors would have had. It splits into a 3-pronged stun weapon that really hurts if its blast is directed at you. Not only does he dress like a Conquistador, but he managed to find a bunch of other people that were also willing to dress like Conquistadors to be his henchmen. He operates out of a building that was either from that time or built in that fashion. No one is doing it like him anymore. Bring back villains that had a theme and stuck to it like it was on sale at Party City. Honestly, I don't want to see any more villains that just wear all black and have pointy faces. I want camp, I want drama, and I want people to have a brand. So this next guy, his name is Thug, and that's what he is. He looks like a robot cowboy that has seen better days. Thug made a name for himself in the comics as part of Loeb's team. Loeb was very interested in the science behind humans turning into mutants even though they were born with no X gene. Thug assisted in Scalp Hunter's capture and along the way fought various X-Men. He came head to head with the X-Men again later during the Experience Substance promotional gala. Thug is not a mutant, he is a human cyborg. He had been working close to John Sublime and received cybernetic enhancements from him. Their purpose was to mimic mutant powers. They made him very hard to hurt. He was resistant to most attacks pain-wise, but you can clearly hurt the guy if the array of scars on him or anything to go off of. Probably the most interesting thing to me that would be just so useful when in a fight is the fact that Loeb was able to down download info about the X-Men, who they are, and how they fight into his brain. He downloaded that into Thug, so Thug had a better chance at fighting them. Very cool. This Thug debuted in Uncanny X-Men 515 in 2009, but there are other Thug characters. They are green, and they have no correlation to 616 Thug. The villain El Tigre debuted in X-Men 25 in 1966. His human name is Juan Moros, and he was a treasure hunter. Specifically, he focused on treasures from the ancient world. He is a menace. That is literally what he is described as on the cover of his debut comic. In that comic, he finds an amulet that belonged to the Mayan sky god. It gives him an array of powers like telepathy, telekinesis, and something called precognition, knowing if danger is coming or near. El Tigre with all these powers only exists when he has part of the sky god's amulet. When both pieces are put together, he just turns into the sky god. X-Men issue 25 explains this whole journey. In issue 26, we see a fight between the X-Men and El Tigre, with the X-Men trying to get the amulet off. They do, of course, succeed, and El Tigre is back to himself again and arrested. He later reappears to fight off against Khazar in issues 3, 4, and 5 of Volume 2, but issue 5 is where El Tigre has met his match in the form of the Mystic Mist. The mist causes him to evolve to the state of death, and he falls off a cliff. We do see a very old, very still body, so I think it's safe to say El Tigre is permanently resting. But you never know. The Neo race is made of super mutants, and we are looking at super mutant Salvo. He was part of the Neo war clan that brawled with the X-Men. It happened toward the beginning of the war between humans and mutants. The war kicked off when all the mutant powers were removed by the High Evolutionary, but you probably know that already. He survived the scrap with the X-Men. He didn't survive Magneto. He tried to attack him. He was torn apart. Why did Salvo attack the master of magnetism, one of the most powerful mutants? I don't know. If I were made of solid metal, which is what Salvo is made of, I simply would not have done that. I have a lot of questions about this guy. One thing about Salvo is the metal. He can turn into like guns on his arms, and he draws the ammo from his body. But if he does that, would he eventually disappear? I have to wonder, because I imagine the only thing he has to draw from himself is himself. Is he just shooting pieces of himself? And would said ammo stay as metal forever, or would you be left with toes on the ground? I feel like these are valid questions, but would this mean he has a very powerful healing factor if he were to regenerate every atom he's lost in a fight? Lots of questions for a character that I will probably never see again.
Number 10. Unus the Untouchable. Unus the Untouchable. What a wild character. An oldie and a goodie. Unus actually first appeared back in the original X-Men run, making his first appearance back in X-Men issue number 8, which after hundreds of X-Men issues is pretty old at this point. Unus himself is what he sounds like. His mutant powers allow him to become untouchable when he wishes, shielding him completely when activated. This psionic repulsion shield that he can create can be as thick or thin as he wants. Unus, whose current civilian name is Gunther Bane, has also been shown to be capable of reaching through the shield himself if needed, without dropping it entirely. Pretty powerful. It's not so powerful if someone comes and tries to make the shield something you have to deal with all the time, which is how they defeated him the first time though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we are doing here, if you love obscure X-Men villains like me, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nemesis. This character rose to notoriety under a different name and is commonly referred to and known by that codename, but we can't say it here on YouTube, so instead we're gonna go with this other name, Nemesis, which is also a very AOA name, so yeah. Nemesis is known in the Age of Apocalypse reality for being the son of Apocalypse. At least the alleged son of Apocalypse. I think we pretty much know at this point. We also don't know who his mother is though, so that's still a mystery. But it probably wasn't the woman we now know as Apocalypse's wife in the main continuity thanks to modern X-Men books, Genesis. She's also kind of a confusing name for her to have in regards to Apocalypse's and X-Men history, but anyways. Nemesis, being an ally and horseman of Apocalypse, ends up being a major antagonist and problem for the X-Men in this universe, who are led by Magneto, as Professor X is dead in AOA, which is kinda, you know, what helped bring about this whole dread alternate reality of Earth 295, aka Age of Apocalypse. Number 8. Dark Riders. Oh boy, the Dark Riders. What a weird group. No wonder we haven't seen them that much. The Dark Riders are believed to be Inhumans who for some reason allied themselves with Apocalypse, seemingly believing in his vision of a mutant-dominated world and his ideology of survival of the fittest. I don't know how Apocalypse convinced them that this was a good idea, but they do seem to be pretty into it, I'd say, so I gotta assume that he was just like really persuasive and didn't just straight up threaten them. But still, it's a whole weird thing. The Dark Riders, they're weird. The original roster included team members Foxbat, Gauntlet, Tusk, Hard Drive, Synapse, and Barrage. I mean, I feel like that also just says it all. Listen to those names. The Dark Riders. Number 7, Cassandra Nova. I love Cassandra Nova. With every issue of Marauders I am reading, I fall more in love with this strange and terrifying character. Cassandra Nova is basically Charles Xavier's evil twin, but she's also not a straight up evil twin. She is what the Shi'ar would actually call a Mumadrai. The Shi'ar believe that Mumadrai are basically evil twin spirits of newborns who must be defeated before said person can be born. So the idea with that is that like basically we all before we were born fought an evil version of ourselves. They serve to represent the exact opposite of everything that we are. So in the case of Xavier, who is often presented as being a pretty good guy, though you know, not always, Cassandra is pretty evil in comparison. While Xavier did successfully defeat her before he came into the world with his telepathic mutant powers manifesting while he was in the womb, because of his own psionic potential, Cassandra herself was powerful enough to survive this and eventually would return years later to fight against Xavier and his beloved mutants. Although in being Charles's twin, she herself is also basically a mutant, so yeah. She's a mutant, but she's also Mumadrai. Number 6, Nimrod. If we're talking about the new Nimrod, he is well known thanks to the current era, but even he is still somewhat obscure as an X-Men villain, considering that, you know, he hasn't been around for too long and only appears in a few issues at this point. However, even going back and talking about the more famous Nimrod from the Days of Future Past reality, for those who are not familiar, this could actually still be a version of the character who is considered obscure. The main Days of Future Past reality is often considered to be Earth 811, which is where Nimrod hails from. Here, and even in the current main timeline of Earth 616, Nimrod is considered to be a super Sentinel, a super advanced mutant killing and detecting machine. So if you thought the Sentinels were bad, woo, wait till you meet Nimrod. He's crazy, even though his name is kinda dumb. That's why I love him though. Number 5, Harold Leland. Despite having recently returned, Harold is usually someone often left out when it comes to his involvement with the previous villainous group known as the Hellfire Club. Or well, you know, he's kind of more, he's like on the side. Like Harry's there, but maybe in the back. Well, really, the Hellfire Club has become 2 different entities at this point now as well, with one remaining pretty villainous and the other being a somewhat altruistic Krakoan-based business known as the Hellfire Trading Club. Prior to Harry's resurrection on Krakoa though, he was a pretty bad guy and member of the Hellfire Club, back when it was made up of villains, before it was, you know, just about business and mutants and all that stuff. Throughout many of his Hellfire days, Leland was often seen as the right-hand man to more well-known mutant villain, Black King of the Hellfire Club, Sebastian Shaw. And those were also back in the days when the Hellfire Club just wanted to like rule the world. Although who knows, maybe the trading company does want to rule the world. That would be an interesting twist. Number 4, Charles Xavier II, or Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the child of Mystique and Professor X. Wait. What? Yep, at one point these two had a child together, and in the main continuity too. That happened. Well, we don't really know fully what happened to this child in the main continuity, who I feel like we kinda just forgot about, who Mystique also gave up for adoption, surprise surprise. We do know of an alternate version of the character who actually gets a bit of a story in the reality of Earth 13729, where he joins up with his half-brother Reyes and basically becomes a villain. So that's the version we're focusing on for this point. Charles Xavier II accidentally kills his adoptive mother when his powers emerge, causing him to seek out his birth mother, Mystique. However, she is no longer around because she has been killed at this point by his half-brother, Reyes. Charles II then decides to create his own team of X-Men, believing that the current team has disgraced his father's name, who is also dead at this point. However, he's not a very good guy at all, and instead of inspiring a team of mutants to, you know, be better, he just uses mind control to get them to join him, giving them just enough awareness and control to kind of realize what's happening to them, but not enough that they can actually do anything about it. Yikes, that's really evil, man. That's really evil. Like, he could have just mind controlled them and been like, then you just won't be aware. But no, he was like, I want you to know what's happening. Number 3, Horiculture. Horiculture are such an awesome group of villain ladies. I really hope they do continue to appear for years to come and become super mainstream and not not obscure. Like, I want to see them in the MCU. They deserve a live-action adaptation despite being pretty new. They made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3, and are a group of villainous women who plan to take over the world by controlling seeds and crops. In essence, they hope to drastically diminish the human population of Earth to return the world to a more natural state, thereby deciding through controlling seeds and crops as botanical scientists who will live and who will die. Number 2, Lucifer. Lucifer is another super old school villain who you may have forgotten about, or you never knew about to begin with perhaps. But you know who didn't forget? I didn't forget. I did not forget back when Professor X weirdly implied that Lucifer, as in maybe the devil at the time that he was bringing it up, was the one behind him losing the ability to walk. That happened at one point, and I was like, what is happening here? Now, Lucifer is not actually Satan though. He's not that Lucifer. He's actually an alien from outer space. I don't think it makes it better. Lucifer is a Quist from the planet Quistelium. He originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was foiled by Xavier, so he basically dropped a big rock on him. I'm not joking, that's pretty much what happened. Although initially implied to maybe be the devil, we later learn he is just a super advanced and intelligent alien dude. Though not too intelligent because, you know, the X-Men do defeat him. Number 1, Cordyceps Jones. Cordyceps Jones is one of the newest villains to pester the X-Men. He actively fought against the most recently retired roster in the current run, before Forge, Firestar, Iceman, Magic, and Havoc joined the team. Cordyceps Jones, however, only recently went up against the X-Men, having targeted Earth by putting a bounty on it after encouraging people to gamble on its destruction at one of his massive cosmic casinos, Game World. Prior to that, he made his first appearance in the 2017 Rocket series in issue number 4, which is also why Rocket was the one to help the X-Men with finding Game World and infiltrating it. Thankfully, they had a direct link to him through a team member at the time, Rogue, whose husband Gambit is a fellow friend of Rocket's through their shared love of gambling. We also learned in their pursuit of Game World and Cordyceps Jones that Gambit's secret nickname for Rocket is Small Blind. Cordyceps Jones might be newer in the comics, having appeared in less than 10 issues at the time of this recording, but he's actually an ancient threat, being over 30,000 years old and also being a giant parasitic fungal spore. He and obscure Wolverine villain Spore actually could probably do some crazy damage should they ever team up. That would be pretty wild. If you're watching this and you're from Marvel, make that happen. That sounds like a cool team up actually. And now we know Spore is maybe alive.
Let's kick it off with a big bang, or something that may have predated the Big Bang, the Phoenix Force. There really isn't a question about how strong the Phoenix Force is. It is one of the most powerful beings in the universe, the Marvel universe at least. It has unlimited power, and it's not just a high-level threat, it's been deemed an extinction-level threat. No one really knows how it works, which I think works in its favor. If you don't know how the thing works, you don't know how to defeat it probably. The Phoenix Force has warped reality on a universal scale before, which is not an easy feat. The X-Men are definitely grateful the Force has taken a Jean Grey, because otherwise a fight against it would be near impossible to win. Not to say they haven't fought it, they have, they just usually are fighting the Force when it is attached to Jean, so she can help like from the inside. The Phoenix Force in its usual state is neither good nor bad. It's when it became the Dark Phoenix that panic set in. Dark Phoenix was a villain, evil, craved destruction, it wasn't cute. Saber-tooth is a toothache, persistent, annoying, and has the potential to be a bigger problem than you think. Victor Creed has been around forever. Not really, he was born in the 19th century, but with all the problems he has caused, it feels longer. Mainly, Saber-tooth is focused on hurting Wolverine, but he does not discriminate, he will attack anybody. Saber-tooth is very similar to Wolverine, some argue even stronger. One classifies him as a severe threat, I agree. He has an incredibly powerful healing factor and superhuman senses, claws are on each of his fingers and toes, and he has fangs. Pretty standard stuff when it comes to mutants honestly, but he becomes way more threatening when you take his life experience into account. He spent a lot of time over his long life training, working with multiple organizations including Hydra, the CIA, and Weapon X. He learned to fight, to track and hunt, to shoot accurately, manipulate and gaslight like it's an Olympic sport, and just overall sharpen his intellect. He was adamantiumed twice, the first time by Apocalypse and then the second by Weapon X. In a surprising turn of events, Professor X and Magneto accidentally created a merged persona. His name is Onslaught, and he is the worst. Onslaught was created after Magneto ripped the adamantium off Wolverine's bones, and Professor X kind of lost it and made Magneto catatonic. Turns out when that happened, Professor X absorbed Magneto's emotions emotions, and then those merged with the darkness inside Professor X that he'd kept hidden away, and boom, we have Onslaught. Onslaught stayed hidden away for a long time. It was when Professor X's astral body was brought to the physical plane by Nate Gray that he was freed. Onslaught took over Professor X and attempted to get the X-Men to try and work against humanity. The X-Men were like, absolutely not. Onslaught got upset and started absorbing mutants and other powerful beings. It took the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and the Avengers to destroy Onslaught. It makes sense considering he had the powers of Magneto and Professor X in one body. Nathaniel Essex has gone by many names and clones, but no matter which version is out there, he is a nuisance. Originally, he was a low-level threat, just a human scientist, but then he was genetically modified by Apocalypse. That's when he became Mr. Sinister. He was really focused on machines and accurately predicted that they would someday take over the world, so to combat this, he had the genius idea to create his own AI that would be better than all the other AIs. What could go wrong? Nathaniel wanted to become a Dominion, and that is the highest level of interstellar intelligence. Dominions exist outside of space and time, and they're basically gods. They are so strong that very few things are considered threats to them, the Phoenix Force being one actually. On Nathaniel's journey to reach this status, he created 3 clones of himself and 1 clone of his wife. One continued with Mr. Sinister, one would become Dr. Stasis, his third would be Orbis Stellaris, and his wife's would be Mother Righteous. Each clone had a purpose to investigate so that the necessary info could be gathered to turn Nathaniel into a Dominion. Each of these clones caused problems for the X-Men at some point too. Eventually Nathaniel did reach his goal and took on the title Enigma. Enigma has been kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes for a long time since it exists outside of space and time. For the most part, Enigma doesn't bother the X-Men too much, it's his clones that cause the most trouble. The Nimrod, that is Nimrod, caused quite a stir at the 3rd Hellfire Gala, left such a lasting impression that I had to include it. Nimrod is a type of Sentinel, so there are multiple Nimrods out there. There was one in Days of Future Past, but this one right now is the one that attacked the Hellfire Gala. The head of Orchis, at the time of its creation, created this Nimrod from a place of grief after losing her husband. She placed her husband's consciousness into the robot's head, but then it got erased after an attack on the Orchis facility. Now this very powerful robot has no humanity in it, and it vows to put an end to mutants. So the robot is a bit messed up. The robot worked with an Omega Sentinel to trap and off Professor X. Then the robot worked with Orchis, the organization, which we will talk about in a second. That's when the Hellfire Gala was attacked. This was a brutal attack on mutants, Iceman, many new X-Men members, and Juggernaut did not make it out. This robot was created to protect humanity from mutants, but Nimrod went a little haywire and started wiping out humanity instead. But Nimrod came from somewhere, and that was Orchis. Orchis is an organization created to preserve humans, designed to prevent mutant ascendancy over humanity. It turns out mutants were appearing at an alarming rate to those people and were set to surpass the human population sooner rather than later. Orchis is extreme. They caused the biggest drop in population for mutants since M-Day, and that was the attack on the Hellfire Gala mentioned in the Nimrod point. When that attack took place, around the world and at the gala, about 250,000 mutants were taken out. That is a strong and organized organization if I've ever read one. To top it off, they also messed with Krakoa's main export that had the world accepting the island in the first place. The export was like the fauna of the island. It had healing properties and was used in lots of human medicines. Orchis messed with it and made it so that any human that ingested the tampered export would pass away. This was revealed to the world with the message that for every mutant on Earth, a human would be harmed for it. So now the remaining mutants couldn't stay on Earth anymore or had to go into hiding. Thankfully, the remaining mutants were able to regroup and strike back, defeating the organization before all the life on Earth could be wiped out. Apocalypse has faced off against the X-Men, each time more harrowing than the last. He is pretty extreme in his thinking, believing very strongly in a survival of the fittest philosophy, which makes sense. He is the first of the 2nd generation of mutant kind, so he is the fittest, and his life has just been one surviving horror after another. That doesn't excuse his behavior though. Apocalypse does have a job. He was employed by the Celestials to ensure evolution takes its natural course. With the job came some perks like getting enhanced with celestial tech, making his already powerful form even more of a threat, even godlike. He would go into periods of hibernation so he could rest and then technically live longer. When he he woke up in the modern age, his first order of business was to cause a major conflict between mutants and humans. Nap time is over, it is go time now. One thing about Apocalypse is that he is always moving forward, always literally evolving into the best, most powerful version of himself. He can't stay dead, but he can be taken out of the picture for a while, but unfortunately, he will always come back. A quick list of some of the things Apocalypse is capable of: matter manipulation, self-atomic manipulation, telepathy, flight, telekinesis, and various celestial energy manipulation like teleportation, for example. If you thought Apocalypse was bad, wait till you meet his wife. Genesis is an Omega level mutant capable of beating Annihilation in god form in one-on-one combat. She mentally controls the plants in her general vicinity, that's her main deal, including the flora that might be inside you, kinda. Vegans better watch out. Genesis doesn't necessarily control the plant life in you to make you do whatever she wants, though I'm sure that's probably like the next step for her. What she uses the flora for is to spy on you and even track you. She is one of the characters that spends a lot of time wearing the Annihilation helm. Her and her husband were the rulers of Akara, their children, the four horsemen of the Apocalypse. Genesis is very skilled in combat and the process of war because she is a millennia old and has been fighting a war for most of her life. The one between Amenth demons and the mutants of her world, and that the X-Men eventually did get involved in too. I guess you could say she started out good, she was just fighting for her people after all, but when she defeated Annihilation and then had to take on his helm, she got corrupted, and that's when her true villain era started. That's when she started conquering places and starting new wars. She was only defeated when the golden helm was knocked from her head. So I've done all this yapping about Annihilation and his helm, but I have not yapped too much about him, so who is he? Annihilation is a dark god residing in the darker world known as Amenth. He rules demons. He is kind of like the Satan of his world. He is very old, he is so old, he has myths and legends about him. One such myth puts in perspective just how powerful this dark god is. It is said that Annihilation is the spirit of Amenth in physical form. Annihilation's energy lives in the golden helm of Annihilation. Those that wear it get possessed with his powerful spirit, and that's how he fought the X-Men. He did it through Genesis. Annihilation's influence is incredibly powerful. Apocalypse is one of the only known things that can hold him off, so this trio of Apocalypse, Genesis, Annihilation is kind of like rock, paper, scissors. Apocalypse beats Annihilation, Annihilation beats Genesis, and Genesis beats Apocalypse. Eventually, the Golden Helm was made into a staff. It had less of an influence over people that way. It wasn't destroyed until Storm came into contact with it, and then she destroyed it because it started whispering to her. I had to put Magneto in first place. I literally have no choice. Magneto might not be a cosmic creator of the universe or capable of destroying a universe with a flick of his wrist, but he has been causing problems for the X-Men for decades, pretty much since the start, and is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful mutant on Earth, so he gets first place. I think my favorite Magneto thing that proves he is a danger to society is that the world literally has a protocol to deal with him. Magneto protocols. You know you've made it in the villain world when people prepare in advance to deal with you, even if you aren't planning anything yet. Magneto also has a very personal stake in the game when it comes to fighting the X-Men and mutants. Him and Professor X were literally best friends. Having to incapacitate your best friend is a really hard thing to do. Plus, when you go to the root of why Magneto does what he does, his message is one that some people can agree on. His actions are just a bit extreme. So people might agree with his message and then get radicalized later. Magneto, with all the horrible things he has done, it could have been worse. His ability to control magnetism is not just metal and magnets for anyone new here. He controls magnetic fields too, which has numerous evil possibilities. We learned how far Magneto was willing to go for his cause when Magneto protocols were activated and he couldn't return to Earth. The combo of that and the X-Men coming after him made Magneto stop holding back, and he ripped the adamantium off Wolverine's skeleton. To make matters worse, Magneto is actually competent and smart. Hate it when your enemy actually knows what they're doing. The day Magneto permanently joined the X-Men on Krakoa was a good day indeed. Magneto, the true definition of who are you, friend or foe? Magneto has humbled the X-Men many times, but Magneto Triumphant will be our first example today. I also like this one because it has to do with the time Magneto was turned into a baby. This story was released in the 1970s and the X-Men were fighting another bad guy actually, Mesmero. He had the team mesmerized, so incapacitated. By the time they break out of that, Magneto is on the scene and has already defeated Mesmero. He did it to capture the X-Men himself and lock them in chairs and then turn them into babies. Magneto is one of the most powerful mutants out there, so that's common knowledge, but still having the X-Men team up coming for you, it's a lot to deal with. The reason he managed to win, the X-Men decided to fight him one-on-one. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. There was a lesson lesson in here. The one-on-one thing obviously didn't work. Once trapped, Magneto leaves the team to a robot and he goes out and causes chaos. Rookie mistake, finish your battles yourself, because Storm frees the team and they showed they learned from their mistakes, fighting Magneto as a team and defeating the powerful mutant. Zorn technically Sublime's infiltration of the X-Men school and then resulting destruction has to be a sore spot for the super family. Zorn was originally introduced to be Magneto in a disguise. He wasn't real. The story ended with Magneto dying, but Zorn was such a loved character and Marvel needed Magneto alive again, so they decided to retcon this. Zorn was real and had a twin, and Zorn was just pretending to be Magneto, pretending to be Zorn. He did all that chaotic stuff because he was under Sublime's mind control. The intention was to make mutants appear dangerous and unstable, so when it came time to convince humans to side against mutants, it would just be easier. Zorn was a trusted friend to the X-Men. He was a teacher at the school and worked very closely with young, traumatized teens. That's not a position you give to just anyone. In all fairness, when Zorn started teaching, he was Zorn. He was possessed while at the school. Still, it must have been a little paper cut sting when the X-Men found out their school was infiltrated. Throwing a bucket of lemon juice on that paper cut, Zornito went wild, destroying the city and ending Jean Grey. Wolverine took care of him, but the damage was already done. Mojo once roasted Wolverine in front of trillions. X-Men the Animated Series is the gift that keeps on giving. In episode 11 of season 2, the X-Men are up against Mojo. Mojo is from a world addicted to TV. Whoever creates the most interesting TV rules the world. Who would be better for a reality show than the X-Men? They even have a dramatic love triangle, and Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean are exactly what led to this humbling. The X-Men are placed in parodies of popular TV shows like Miami Vice and Star Trek, becoming Miami Mutants and Rogue Star. The third show is a parody of the 60s sitcom I Dream of Jeannie. This one is changed to I Dream of Jean, poking fun at the famous love triangle. Fans recall this episode as being fun and over the top. The title card for the fake series looks scandalous, but Jean is wearing a peach-colored suit, so it looks bad, but it isn't. As for someone that was actually roasted for not wearing many clothes, Horiculture beat up the X-Men with their wit and their fists. Horiculture is a group of women that believe the Earth was at its purest when it wasn't so populated. Their goal then is to depopulate the Earth. They use their biology and other scientific skills to modify anything botanical. The old women go to Krakoa because of its exotic plant life. In their words, they love the S word out of flowers. Horiculture starts spraying mutants with this green stuff that just stops movement. Cyclops, Emma Frost, and Sebastian Shaw, they find them to take care of business, only they get way more than they bargained for. The old women came to play and they came to slay. Before a punch is even thrown, they roast Frost's clothing, or lack thereof, establish they have taken care of their cheating husbands, and just generally prove they are going to be harder to take down than anticipated. One of the old ladies gets thrown to the ground and Cyclops is very concerned for her well-being, only she faked hurting her hip. It was a lie, and she gets Cyclops with the green stuff, screaming, "Stupid boy, we do water aerobics and yoga 4 days a week at the YMCA." The X-Men got the equivalent of getting beat up with a handbag. Grotesque literally took out one of the most important figures to the X-Men, Professor X. If that doesn't count as humbling, I don't know what does. So Grotesque basically lives kind of like under the surface world, and his world was totally destroyed. He guessed that the cause came from up here, and he guessed correctly. It was a machine that caused it here on the surface world, and it affected the underworld. He came to the surface to avenge his people. During the final big battle between Grotesque and the X-Men, the machine, it blows up and it happens to take out Professor X, but psych, it turns out that was never Professor X. From the past little while, Professor X was actually Changeling. The real professor was off preparing for a battle he didn't want the X-Men to know about yet. Changeling was a shapeshifter that was going to pass soon and wanted to end his life on a good guy note. Still, the X-Men didn't know all of that at the time. Even if some of them did, they still had to watch the physical body of the professor roll over. Grotesque went on to cause a variety of problems throughout his life. He is a hard villain to get rid of. Magneto again, this time for ripping the adamantium off Wolverine's skeleton, because what the heck was that? Marvel Leave Wolverine Alone challenge level impossible. This famous Magneto the Ripper moment happened in X-Men 25. It was the 90s. Wolverine has almost never been hurt so bad before. His healing factor didn't know what to do. Jean had to hold his body together here telepathically just to keep Wolverine clinging onto his life. This is probably the closest time Wolverine has ever come to actually laying to rest, but he is Wolverine, so Marvel can't do that. It took a very long time for Logan to heal, and after he went a little bit feral, we learned about the bone claws though. He lost his nose, he wore a bandana, can't judge him for any of that. Getting humbled that bad makes you do funny things. Do we love Jean Grey? Of course, that's mother right there. Do we love Dark Phoenix? Maybe, in a different way. Interesting character, but please stop being so mean. The Dark Phoenix first appearing caused literally so many problems for the X-Men. It was like they had a punch card for defeats, like lose 9 times, you get the 10th as a win. This was a real moment for Jean Grey fans. She was active at this time. She was devouring stars and destroying entire civilizations and taking the X-Men out of course. Now the thing is, was it Grey doing all these horrible things? Not really. The Dark Phoenix is its own thing. Grey is just one of the only people that can act as an appropriate host for it. So the Dark Phoenix is the one responsible for all the bad things that have happened, but wore Jean like a cover, roping her into all this damage even though she didn't want to do it. Jean Grey further proves she didn't want to do it when she sacrifices herself to save the day. Scarlet Witch is not always a villain, but she has done some truly evil things to make her a slightly gray area. Scarlet Witch destroyed the X-Men when she caused M-Day. She didn't just humble the team, she all but eliminated the entire gene pool. Her famous line, "No more mutants," caused one of the most devastating losses the mutant community has ever seen. They not only lost the fight, they also lost their powers, and many mutants lost their lives. There were only a few survivors from M-Day. It took a long time to figure out how to regain lives and powers. Even when they figured it all out, the solution wasn't perfect, and many mutants did not return. If it makes you feel any better, there were repercussions for Wanda. She lost almost everyone's trust and is now mildly feared, only mildly because she did help bring everybody back that she could, which was the least she could do, in my opinion. Mutant Mass wasn't the X-Men's day, week, month, or even their year. You can probably guess the vibes were going to be bad. Not only did many people pass, dozens more were left seriously injured. One mutant even lost one of the most important pieces of his body. Angel lost his wings. He'd had them so long that learning to live without them was tough. Him losing his wings during this tragic event also led to him becoming a horseman for Apocalypse, Angel of Death. In literature, which Marvel is, the loss of angel wings usually means the character is experiencing a fall from grace. Can't think of a bigger fall than becoming a horseman for Apocalypse. If that hadn't happened though, Angel wouldn't have had new cool powers, so it's kind of like we feel bad, but we're kind of glad he at least got something out of it all. X-Men Days of Future Past was a nightmare. Everybody had something bad happen to them. It's set in a future dystopian world. Mutants are placed in evil camp situations as there is a lot of mutant fear in the general public. The Sentinels run everything, and they are mutant hunting robots. This comic arc was released in the 80s, so the future dystopian world was actually 2013. The few X-Men that are not captured are at Plan Z when it comes to fixing this problem, so their last effort is to send Kitty Pryde's mind back in time, intending for it to possess herself in the past so she can warn the X-Men about the future so they can prevent the damage from happening. Well, the reason things took a turn for the worst for the X-Men was an important politician getting taken out by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, so they have to stop that. They also have to prevent the deaths of Professor X and Moira McTaggart. They do, of course, but even though they win, it's not actually clear if the future from 2013 was totally stopped or just delayed. It's almost a decade after it was supposed to happen, so hopefully they're good.
Mr. Sinister was once brilliant scientist and geneticist Dr. Nathaniel Essex. Nathaniel, however, turned to more mad science after the loss of his son, sadly. When offered an opportunity by Apocalypse to become more evolved, Essex ended up taking it. He claimed a new name based off of something his wife had called him upon learning of his true nature, Sinister. Mr. Sinister still seems obsessed with finding a way to fix his long-dead son. Sinister has a particular obsession with the Summers family and even created Madelyne Pryor, playing matchmaker to set her up with Cyclops so that the two would marry and produce a perfect mutant child, which Sinister later hoped to procure and study. Sinister also managed to devise a plan that allowed him to completely alter reality, making everything and everyone a part of his own sinister universe in Sins of Sinister. Basically like becoming a god, like becoming ruler of the universe. Now, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of folks understand understand just how deadly this next mutant is, but I'm still not sure if folks see him as a real threat just because of where he's at right now. But a friendly reminder that when Vulcan first turned up in the comics during Deadly Genesis, that is just what he was. Someone who was threatening the X-Men after feeling as though he'd been abandoned by them. Vulcan is the other Summers brother. There's Cyclops, there's Havoc, and of course there is Vulcan, the youngest. Gabriel Summers, however, is maybe the most deadly of these three. Vulcan toiled to seize the Shi'ar Empire for himself after marrying Deathbird. When his father, Corsair, demanded that Vulcan stop his ruthless pursuit of power, by the way, Vulcan responded by killing him. Declaring himself emperor caused a great rift in the Shi'ar Empire, plunging it into a civil war. He also at times has been just generally a kind of awful brother to Havoc. Not cool, Vulcan. Honestly, this next villain is a terrifying one, and one that was kind of short-lived in terms of his appearances when you consider just how horrific he was. We're talking about Gregory Terrariton, aka Slayback. Slayback was a Deadpool villain who also had tanglings with Weapon X and kind of with mutants a little bit as a mercenary. He ended up being hired by a group who was hoping to use Deadpool's healing factor to find a cure for the Legacy virus. Inherently, this doesn't sound super villainous when I say it like that. It's like, well, that would be good, wouldn't it? But at the same time, they weren't doing this out of the kindness of their heart or to just save mutants, but they were simply doing it so they could make a fortune, as once they found the cure, they planned to charge a massive amount for it. Factor 3? That sounds like some kind of toothpaste. This is another villainous team composed of mutants but led by an alien known as Mutant Master. You might not remember it because it was only around for a few issues and also first appeared way early on in X-Men issue number 28 back in 1967. This team popped up a few times and would often force mutants into doing their bidding, often mind-controlling Banshee to attempt to kidnap or help kidnap Professor X. Fortunately, in issue number 39, Factor 3 was defeated for good and hasn't bothered the X-Men since, at least not as far as I know. But were they to come back, who is to say what kind of chaos they could sow? After all, they were a pretty impressive threat when they first showed up on the scene. Ruff House is definitely a lesser known villain, though that doesn't mean we shouldn't be intimidated by him. Although he starts out as a villain in the Wolverine comics and a brute, he later kind of becomes Wolverine's ally after he was sold off by General Coy to be used for experimentation. Pretty messed up. Even Wolverine felt bad for this guy, despite being his rival and his enemy on Madripoor. Wolverine decided to go after him and as such became embroiled in a major political conflict in Tierra Verde, not to be confused with Terra Verde, a different republic that also exists in Marvel Comics. Despite Ruff House saving Wolverine though and becoming temporary allies with him, Ruff House would later go back to being a straight up villain of Logan, even renewing his partnership with Bloodscream, another lesser known villain from the 80s, later on. The Marauders are a team a lot of folks don't think about being a threat, especially not anymore considering we have since redeemed the team name with Kate Pryde's heroic Marauders team. But let's not forget what this team was capable of back in the day, and which powerhouse of a mutant brought this team together. It might surprise you to know that Gambit actually created the villainous Marauders team. Of course, he didn't do it because he was truly a villain deep down or anything like that. He basically did it all for Mr. Sinister. Remember when it was revealed that Gambit had a dark secret in the comics and everyone thought it was going to be that he was the witness and the person who ended up betraying the X-Men? It wasn't that. The secret was that he had worked for Mr. Sinister as a retroactive favor after Mr. Sinister had helped Gambit to control his powers by, well, removing a part of his brain. Mr. Sinister had Gambit assemble the Marauders and use them to attack the Morlocks, who he believed were abominations when it came to his pursuit of genetic advancement, resulting in the, as we know it, the Mutant Massacre. And Sinister also had the team hunt down and steal baby Nathan from Madelyne Pryor. So they've done some pretty crazy things. Pretty impressive, crazy, villainous things, you know? Unus is of course one of my favorite X-Men villains. I do not think he gets enough love. He is a classic who first appeared on the scene back in the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby days. He was also a villain during the House of M era, though more in the sense that, you know, most mutants were kind of villainous because, you know, they basically were trying to rule the world or were on the verge of ruling the world. Unus the Untouchable is his full mantle, and when we first met him, he was using his mutant powers to cheat in the wrestling ring. Well, I don't know if we can really, you know, call using your mutant abilities cheating per se. I guess in the sense that they weren't being disclosed and that he wasn't wrestling other folks who were on the same level as him, but instead was, you know, wrestling with just regular humans who just had no powers. As you may have guessed, Unus generates basically a powerful force field which he can control that prevents him from being touched, Unus the Untouchable. The first time around, he gave the whole X-Men team major trouble, and it was only thanks to Beast's smarts that they were actually able to defeat him. Beast was able to make it so that Unus could no longer control his powers, so that they were on full force all the time, which also prevented Unus from eating or drinking anything. Needless to say, they wore Unus down, and he ended up changing his tune and agreed to stop his villainy. The Blob is a classic villain who I just think does not get enough love for how powerful he is. Honestly, back in the early days of the X-Men, after learning he was a mutant, the Blob almost single-handedly took down the entire X-Men team. They at first attempted to recruit him, and that's when he learned he was a mutant, but after learning of that fact and that his abilities were actually mutant powers, the Blob decided that he didn't actually need the X-Men and that he was actually more powerful than all of them combined and cooler than them. And when they refused to let him leave, since they had revealed their secret identities to him, this was back when the X-Men had secret identities by the way, and attempted to keep him captive in the X-Mansion, after narrowly escaping, he swore to get revenge on them, and honestly, kind of rightfully so. He returned with the rest of the circus and sideshow performers that he worked with, intimidating the ringleader into even taking orders from him. They returned to the X-Mansion and very nearly ended the X-Men team. The Legacy Virus is one of the most deadly threats we've seen in the comics. We've talked about the Terrigen Mists on part 1, but the Legacy Virus plagued the X-Men and the whole world of mutants after being released accidentally by Mr. Sinister. In fact, Mr. Sinister felt so bad about this, he even tried to work out a cure himself for the virus. As much as he's a villain, Sinister still loves mutant kind and definitely did not want to see them completely wiped out. The virus itself was created by Strife, Cable's evil clone. It only affected those with the mutant X gene. The first time a mutant used their powers after contracting the virus, you would see it activate. This original strain of the virus basically acted like a fast-acting cancer in those who were affected, and we know it as Legacy 1 virus, the first strain of the Legacy virus. And that isn't all. There were actually 2 strains for the Legacy virus, and while the second strain was not as fast acting as the first, I would still argue that it was worse. This strain of the virus was slower acting and would actually cause mutants to lose control of their powers before they die, basically becoming a ticking, superpowered, uncontrollable time bomb. But before this happened, symptoms of those suffering from it would include skin lesions, cough, fever, and autoimmune deficiency, lowering their immune system and making them more vulnerable to other illnesses. So yeah, basically this version of the virus was like the mutant version of our world's AIDS. Pretty terrible. Bastion is now more iconic than ever when it comes to being one of the big players in the X-Men Rogues and Threats gallery. Many people think of Sentinels when they think of big X-Men cybernetic threats, but Bastion is unique in that he is basically a living Sentinel. In the comics, he is mostly just a machine, of course, but one who was raised by humans, giving him human-like traits. But in the X-Men 97 series, he is a literal combination of the two, making him even cooler in my mind. In this series, the Siege Perilous is not involved in his origin story, but instead it was a piece of Nimrod who influenced his creation, instead of him literally kind of being a version of Nimrod, making him part Sentinel and part human here, a literal living machine. Bastion claims to be combining tech and humans together, creating Prime Sentinels, in order to save humanity with his project Operation Zero Tolerance here. But I wonder if, like many other Sentinels out there, he actually might be serving more of the robots' interests than humanity in the long run. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe we won't. Depends on when this video releases. There might be more information after the time of this recording. What are some crazy X-Men threats that you would love to see in X-Men 97? Let me know in the comments. Most people don't think of the Terrigen Mists as being a danger to mutant kind. Most people probably don't think much of the Terrigen Mists at all. But they're there, and you can bet that they are harming mutants if they are around them. As we learned in Humans vs. X-Men when the Terrigen Mists were revealed to be toxic to mutants. Mutants who were exposed to the clouds on Earth ran the risk of straight up dying as a result of exposure. In fact, some actually did. Cyclops, for example, the leader of the X-Men. So what most people might just see as clouds that give the Inhumans their powers, or allow them to access their powers rather, triggering them, to the X-Men team, these are basically clouds of death. Man, I love this next X-Men threat. This is the group known as Horiculture. If you know me, if you've been here before, you know I love Horiculture, and if you're new, welcome in. I love Horiculture. Horiculture is an amazing group made up of a bunch of botanists who each have their own specialty in the field. They also so happen to be a group of geriatric women as well. Their goal is to protect plant life on Earth. It doesn't sound so villainous until you realize how much both humanity and mutant kind stand to threaten Mother Nature simply with their existence, pretty much. Saber-tooth is one of those villains who I feel is often often undermined and underappreciated. Some people don't think much of Victor, thinking of him as no more than a violent and unhinged enemy for Wolverine. But fun fact, he didn't even first appear as a Wolverine villain. No, he actually first appeared in Iron Fist issue number 14 back in the 1970s. Yeah, he was actually kinda like Iron Fist's foe first, if you can believe that. Over the years though, as we've come to learn more about Victor Creed, we learn he too was a mutant and one with a vendetta against Wolverine, who had killed his brother. Saber-Tooth wasn't actually upset about the loss of someone that, you know, he loved so much, like his brother, his family member, as he was upset about the loss of someone he ritualistically tormented every year on his brother's birthday. Which is why he took to ruining Wolverine's birthday once he'd found out that Logan was, of course, responsible. Victor might seem like he's all brawn, no brain, but he's actually a master strategist and tactician who is surprisingly good at playing mind games with his enemies, manipulating them into believing what he wants them to believe and often tricking them into committing terrible acts seemingly on their own. Coming up next, good old Donnie Pierce. Gosh, I love Donnie Pierce. I personally feel like Donald Pierce being a villain of a sort of bygone era is a character and a villain who just does not get enough love, so that's why I decided to include him here on this list. He has accomplished some pretty impressive things, and way before we ever had Bastion, Donald Pierce was it when it came to cybernetic style X-Men villains. Or at least, you know, he was one of the big ones. He's accomplished some pretty cool stuff in his time and almost took out Wolverine with his creations Albert and LCD, who would go on to change their programming so they could instead live independently from Pierce's control. Honestly, fair enough. Still, he came close with that plan, and he's done a lot of other pretty terrible things before, to be real with you. I mean, I love that Bastion is getting this like amazing like comeback time, but I do wonder, like, what about Donald Pierce? Will we ever see Donald Pierce again? That would be great. The Shadow King is a threat that not many people focus on anymore when it comes to the X-Men. His time for the most part seems to have passed, although he does still appear here and there, but when it comes to his accomplishments and how iconic he's been throughout the years, I think it's important that we all remember his existence. He exists and he's cool. And have I been feeling like he's about to pop up everywhere lately? I have. And is that probably wrong? Probably, but it's just because I kinda love the Shadow King, guys. I'm going through a Shadow King phase right now. Shadow King did, after all, almost completely take out the X-Men at one point, and he has manipulated many of them throughout his life, as well as many of their allies. In certain alternate realities, he actually has also been successful in defeating the X-Men, so there you go. Cassandra Nova might seem like a weirdo, and trust me, she most definitely is a weirdo. If you were thinking that, you are correct. But at the same time, just because her origin is super weird doesn't mean she should be discounted as a villain. In fact, she might be responsible for one of the sole most terrifying panels that exists in Marvel Comics. This one from the E is for Extinction story arc. Cassandra Nova is often known for hating mutants and being completely devoid of empathy. Recently this changed, but her gaining empathy honestly didn't make her any less terrifying. It just allowed her to temporarily ally herself with the mutants. When it comes to Emma Frost, I think she is a villain most people don't expect to be super deadly because, well, she's now reformed and an X-Men team member. But that being said, with Emma there are two sides to her, almost. There's the time from before when she was with the Hellfire Club and she was an X-Men villain, and there's the time from after, when she ended up finding some redemption and even joining up with the X-Men team and becoming a hero. Yeah, Emma in the before times was ruthless and definitely was a villain that you wouldn't want to mess with. I think a lot of folks now kind of discount her as a villain because, you know, she's been a hero for so long now, but I definitely think it would be interesting to see Emma return to her villain roots and to also see how her time as a hero may have changed her approach to villainy. Back in the day, there was almost nothing too dastardly in regards to what she was willing to do. Remember when she swapped bodies with Storm? That was just downright diabolical. Orcus is another group that seems like a pretty big threat when it comes to mutant kind, even bigger than Horiculture. Most people might not take them as seriously because they are newer on the scene, but Orcus is pretty impressive when you consider that they're made up of parts of all of the groups who basically felt threatened by mutant kind's growth and evolution in the Dawn of X era. This included many of their enemies who did not disappear, but instead banded together in resistance to the mutants rising up, becoming honestly even more powerful, as well as former mutant allies who had actually begun to grow concerned over how much power and influence the mutants were gaining from banding together. You know it's not good when the allies are joining up with that team, you know what I mean? That's like a lot of power. It's not just enemies, it's allies that have become enemies. Nimrod might sound like a goofy threat and villain for the X-Men in terms of his name, but the choice of name here actually does come from a different meaning for the word than you're likely thinking of. A lot of people think Nimrod and they think dum-dum. Nimrod though can also mean a particularly skilled hunter, which is is just exactly what Nimrod is here. Nimrod is an exceptional sentinel who can adapt and improve as they hunt down mutants, learning and changing as they go based on the mutants and experiences that they encounter during their mission. Nimrod has also proven to be exceptionally terrifying, I would say, in recent years, revealing that they are not simply working for humanity, but instead are actually working for AI life, fighting to eradicate not just mutants, but all living beings. So humanity, also watch out. Even worse for humanity, because humanity, we do have some superpowered people in Marvel, but humans are just squishy. They're squishy people.
At number 10 is Phoenix Force Magneto. In this reality, Magneto merged with the fiery cosmic force, forging a fearsome union. His quest to mold Hope Summers into a Phoenix host underscored his unrelenting will, defying warnings from the Avengers and X-Men alike. Yet this fusion spiraled into chaos, necessitating a coalition from Charles Xavier, the Hulk, and Wolverine to quell the cataclysm. The prospect of a Phoenix Magneto conjures an ominous blend, melding two extremes, the cosmic Phoenix Force and Magneto's unyielding darkness. Unlike others, Magneto swiftly succumbed to the Force's corrupting influence, illuminating his inherent malevolence. This accelerated plunge led to a world-shattering clash, sparing only Wolverine through Jean Grey's timely intervention. In a universe where Magneto harnesses the Phoenix, a realm-engulfing menace emerges. In defeat, this fusion echoes the staggering potency and unbridled havoc they embody, weaving a tale of mutant and cosmic might on an unprecedented scale. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Jugger-nautical. Juggernaut as a massive boat. Yeah, the multiverse is weird, you guys. Anyways, the Jugger-nautical, a seafaring behemoth, is unlike any other. See, this colossal ship being was no ordinary vessel. It was the marionette of a mystical book, a navigator of the arcane. But as fate would have it, this enigmatic tomb found its way into the clutches of none other than Admiral Harry Greik, a high-ranking officer of the Royal Navy. A perfect storm brewed as the Jugger-nautical set its course upon the Exiles, a group tasked with mending the threads of the multiverse, and the Jugger-nautical even crossed paths with the infamous Blackbeard. Yet, the winds of fortune are ever fickle. In a cinematic clash, Blink emerged as the hero of this otherworldly seafaring saga. With a flicker of teleportation mastery, she wrestled control of the book from the Great's grasp and in an act of defiance, hurled it into the abysmal depths of the ocean. At number 8 is Saber-teeth. I mean, it's a team up of saber-tooths from across the multiverse, so I'm calling the team the Saber-teeth. In an alternate reality, a ferocious female saber-tooth is abducted by Graydon Creed, who's on a mission to eradicate versions of Saber-tooth across the multiverse. She's imprisoned with other saber-tooths, all of whom have their power suppressed. Together they break free, confront Graydon, and after a fierce battle, banish him through a portal. United by their experience, they opt to stay in Earth 616, seizing a spaceship to embark on their own interdimensional adventure. At number 7 is Baron Sinister. Welcome to Battle World, a tapestry of twisted domains where alternate realities collide. Among these shards of existence, we find the enigmatic Baron Sinister ruling over his own dominion. Bar Sinister, a realm inhabited by clones and created by the Tyrant's hand. But clones can't be the only thing on this villain's menu, as he keeps a select few non-clones as playthings for his whims. Now Sinister and King Hyperion, two formidable forces, conspire against the House of Braddock of Higher Avalon. Exposed and accused of discord, Sinister faced trial under the gaze of God Emperor Doom's enforcers. A duel between Baron Sinister and Baron Braddock then ensued. Amidst the crumbling Doom's rule, Sinister, edged on by Captain Marvel, joined the rebellion, leading to clashes and a betrayal that culminated in his demise at the hands of Baron Apocalypse. At number 6 is Dark Phoenix Mystique. So this Mystique story is pretty familiar, shadowing the path of her mainstream self up until King Loki decides to give his brother Thor a run for his money with a Harley dose of suffering. During all this, Mystique decides it's time to settle her score with none other than Logan, aka Wolverine. She whips out this Phoenix Blaster, yeah, you heard me right, stealing away the Phoenix Force from him and spreading his body parts across the vast expanse of the multiverse. Her stint as the Dark Phoenix lands her a recruitment offer from the multiversal Masters of Evil. These folks go on a multi-reality rampage, taking out prehistoric heroes left and right. Cue the showdown as they target Earth 616 prehistory. The prehistoric Avengers then team up with time-traveling counterparts for a 9-day cosmic brawl. But ultimately, Dark Phoenix Mystique faces her reckoning, confronting the forces of creation and meeting her end in the torrent of the first firmament. At number 5 is the Pyro-Nightcrawler Chimera. Imagine a world where Pyro and Nightcrawler's DNA are blended together like a mutant smoothie. Now this flaming hot chimera finds itself in the company of the Legion of the Night, a group of shadowy teleporting amalgamations created by Mr. Sinister. Their latest escapade involves a rather daring ambush at the Sanctum Sanctorium, but hold on, there's a little bit of a twist. After Vox Ignis uses her Scream of Change to instill some morals and values into some of the clones, the reformed members of the Legion Unision found themselves in a clash of ideologies with their steadfastly sinister comrades, and the inevitable showdown followed. A brawl that pitted reformation against loyalty, and well, I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but let's just say things got heated, pun intended. At number 4 is Sugar Man. No, he's not a candy enthusiast or a pastry chef. This guy's got a rather unique set of powers that'll make him stand out in the rogues gallery. First up, let's talk about his powerful tongue. Now, I know what you're all thinking. How impressive can a tongue really be? You have no idea. Sugar Man's tongue is no ordinary one. It's like a versatile tool of destruction, capable of piercing through almost anything. And I mean anything. We're talking stone, steel, and even beings in gaseous or liquid form. But that's not all, folks. Sugar Man could do a bit of size and mass alteration as well. He's got this nifty ability to control his own mass, which means he can shrink down if he wants to, and when he loses mass, he doesn't just vanish into thin air, it apparently gets sent off to some mysterious extra-dimensional space. Where exactly? Well, it's anyone's guess. Oh, and injuries are no biggie. He regenerates faster than you can say ouch. He's shrugged off blows that would even make Wolverine winced. Crushed by Colossus' boot? No problem. Beaten to a pulp with a metal pipe? Back on his feet. Impaled with multiple pieces of metal? Just a minor inconvenience. But here's where things get really interesting. Sugar Man isn't just brawn, he's got brains too. Super genius intelligence, in fact, particularly when it comes to all things genetics. At number 3 is Omega World Apocalypse. In the far alternate future of 3167 AD, civilizations crumble, races vanish, and the survivors, the Atlanteans and humans and the Stark Self, Wakandans, Mystics, and Moldoids, find themselves under the oppressive rule of Apocalypse in a place called Omega World, a sprawling structure where Apocalypse has essentially become the heart, turning what remained of Earth into what's essentially an extension of his body. His horsemen, now acting as sort of antibodies or white blood cells, would cleanse the Omega World of anything which would cause him harm. Long story short, Apocalypse gets himself a fatal knife to the back by Nightcrawler, causing Omega World to crumble. At number 2 is the Sky Whale Brood Queen. Okay, this one is super weird. So somehow on Earth 13371, Charles Xavier becomes an Akanti Sky Whale. I can't even look at it. For those listening, imagine a giant cosmic whale with fleshy skin and a pupilless human face. It's truly a bizarre sight to be seen. But things get even more bizarre as our good old Xavier Sky Whale hybrid gets taken over by none other than the Brood Queen, set out on conquering the Marvel Universe and using Xavier as a vessel to transport her alien brood. Now, despite being telepathically controlled by the Brood Queen, Xavier's mental fortitude allowed him to keep most of his powers a secret from her. After teleporting to Earth 616, the Brood Queen was exterminated by the Extreme X-Men. Once freed, Char Whales Xavier, I like that one, Char Whales, no, asks Dazzler to end his life as he knew that in this form he was weak and could be dangerous if controlled by a more powerful mind. Get dumped on, Brood Queen. And at number 1 is President X. In this alternate universe, Charles Xavier, who never establishes Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, decides to become a politician instead. And yup, that's all it takes for Xavier to become the evil polar opposite counterpart to his 616 version, becoming completely wrathful, cruel, and a sadistically megalomaniacal tyrant desiring nothing but total control over everyone around him. Cause remember y'all, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Though he's never revealed to be a mutant himself, it's speculated that Xavier's telekinetic abilities aided him in tracking down mutants across the nation. A stark contrast to his Earth 616 counterpart, this Xavier exhibited an authoritarian and cruel rule, causing protests notably from billionaire Anthony Stark. The catalyst for change arrived as Stark formed the Avengers specifically to counter Xavier's regime. Unfortunately, Xavier's response proved devastating as a missile targeted the Avengers' Quinjet, obliterating its occupants. This tragic loss included iconic figures like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and other— Wait, Thor? Hold up, he took out Thor with a missile? Whoa, okay. With big players gone, Xavier's oppressive reign expanded further, with all mutants confined to a grim prison in Texas, subjected to his psychological torment and horrifically abusive tendencies, even torturing some of them to their demise while subjugating the survivors to cruel experiments in an effort to control their mutations for their own good. This dark incarnation of Xavier remains a chilling portrait of power-driven malevolence, unafraid to exercise a ruthless authority.
Number 10, Madelyne Madelyne Pryor. I have a strong admiration for Madelyne Pryor, one of the most captivating villains in the X-Men series. Maddie's backstory reveals what drives her actions, and despite her evil deeds, one cannot help but empathize with her. She's known as the Goblin Queen, and her dominant energy adds to her straight-up allure. Maddie is a woman who always gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has led her to commit some seriously heinous acts. However, deep down, Maddie craves love and acceptance, and all her attempts to achieve this have only pushed her further away from it, sadly. She perfectly fits the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Maddie is deadly, dangerous, often unhinged, and filled with rage, but her backstory also makes her a very tragic character. It's hard, honestly, not to love her. She definitely deserves your love and admiration. Also, if you're wondering why I included her on this list, it's from experience. Whenever I cosplay as Madelyne Pryor, I frequently get mistaken for DC Comics' Raven, so she's clearly not super well known. But, you know, I love her anyways. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk X-Men here on Top 10 Nerd, I know I do, be sure to head on over to our X-Men playlist for even more good X-Men content. Number 9, Mojo. Mojo is probably one of the freakiest villains we have for the X-Men. While fans of the comics may be familiar with him, more casual fans may not. He is from his own universe known as the Mojoverse. Here he runs his own television network and is obsessed with securing good ratings, making those who serve him perform on live broadcasts, and the performances he often demands from folks usually involve death-defying acts and other dangerous and deadly feats. So, pretty scary. Number 8, Unus the Untouchable. A villain who almost foiled the X-Men in their early days was Unus. Unus the Untouchable was a mutant who couldn't be touched by those who would do harm to him, making him seemingly invincible when he first came up against the X-Men in issue number 8 of the original series. His power was also weirdly specific, as it didn't repel all things from him and mainly seemed to target those who fought against him and projectiles that of course would do him harm. When Unus turned to a life of crime, Beast was the one to stop him by creating a device that intensified his power, causing everything to be repelled from Unus, including food. Starving, Unus eventually agreed to stay on the straight and narrow, and Beast returned his power levels to how they once were, allowing Unus to return to his wrestling career. Number 7, Carmela Unision. Carmela Unision is suspected to be the daughter of Unus the Untouchable. Carmela was one of the members of the Acolytes. She was loyal to Magneto, working specifically under Exodus during her time with his Acolytes. During her time with them, she faced multiple superhero groups, including, you guessed it, the X-Men. Number 6, Dirtnap. Dirtnap is a weird character, but one who kind of has a beautiful story. Dirtnap originally appeared as one of Genesis's Dark Riders, Tyler Dayspring's Genesis, to be clear. Dirtnap was a mutant who had the ability to absorb beings into himself, thereby basically adopting their form. However, you would know it was Dirtnap because of a red smiley face that would appear somewhere on him, either on his clothes or on his body while in that form. While fleeing from Wolverine, however, he absorbed a rat and became stuck, or perhaps just preferred this form, keeping it. Dirtnap would later on actually end up joining the X-Men, befriending Generation X, and even sacrifice his own life to protect them. However, we're now in the time of mutant resurrection, and more recently in the 2022 series of Marauders in issue number 6, Dirtnap was spotted spying on Lockheed, who was in turn spying on villain Brimstone Love's Theater of Pain. The indicator that he returned back to being evil was his smiley face. When he turned to good, it became yellow, but in that issue, it was back to being red. Number 5, Solemn. Solemn is one of the new X-Men villains on the block. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, because, you know, adamantium bones, adamantium skin. But in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own, because this was Saturnine's tournament, and honestly, it was gloriously weird. Instead, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades so that they could enter the tournament and also use said blades in the tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and just overall trickster. Maybe that's why I like him so much. After Ten of Swords, we also see him as a rival of Wolverine. One thing is for sure, you should definitely never trust Solemn, based on what I've seen. Number 4, Pogg Ur-Pogg. Pogg Ur-Pogg is as weird as he sounds, which could be why you've never heard of him before, or it could just be because you weren't reading Ten of Swords like I told you to do before when it was all happening. tisk tisk. For all those who missed out, Ten of Swords was an amazing X-Men crossover event. It was one of those classic true crossovers happening between multiple series with each issue adding a piece of the story. There was also a main series if you wanted the broad strokes, but that also of course perfectly tied into everything else. While it's a lot to read, I thought it was an amazingly done event all in all. Some parts are a bit goofy, some parts are more serious, and some are just downright epic. Pogg Ur-Pogg as a new character and antagonist sits somewhere between the epic and goofy categories. Initially, he appears to be a giant crocodile-like beast from Morocco, but in the end, we learn that this is simply a powerful organic suit he wears, and that inside is the smaller and real Pogg Ur-Pogg, who pilots the suit and is somewhat goblin-like in appearance in reality. Pogg Ur-Pogg also has to rhyme all the time, which I like. Number 3, Spore. Spore was apparently a super ancient evil that was created by the Deviants way back as a weapon to be used against the Eternals. However, Spore didn't just do harm to Eternals, but to all living things it came in contact with. As such, Spore was condemned by the Celestials and killed long ago. Or so they thought. After appearing to have been destroyed, Spore actually lived on through the soil below, in the spot where he was defeated. Eventually, through this soil, he was able to return through substances that were grown in it and used for experimentation on people like Ruff House. In fact, Ruff House ended up being infected and had to be saved later on by Wolverine as a result. Wolverine and his mutant friend Bandera ended up fighting against Spore with some help from the people of Tierra Verde and Sister Salvation, who possibly herself was a mutant. It's not really fully established, but it's suggested. While defeated, a small piece of Spore would apparently survive, having resurfaced recently, albeit somewhat randomly, in the 2020 volume of Iron Man in issue number 22. So that's a thing. I don't think Spore's done anything yet, but he's still apparently around somehow. Number 2, the Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character. They are a bunch of them, a whole race, if you will. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue number 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race. They have only made a handful of appearances, only appearing, I believe, in Knights of X since then, and 2 issues of that miniseries. The Viscora were the reason that Sword initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world, or possibly said universe, wiping out everything within its existence. This was their intention with Earth and the main continuity, but in Cable they were initially stopped by Kid Cable and his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey. Number 1, Brimstone Love. Whether we're talking about the Brimstone Love of Earth 928 or the Brimstone Love of Earth 616, both are pretty obscure to be honest. The original Brimstone Love, who first appeared in the Earth 928 reality, only made 8 appearances, while the main continuity version of the character has only made 3 appearances. Both are the leader and man behind the Theater of Pain. Tragically, while Brimstone Love was a newer villain to the Earth 616 continuity, making his first appearance in the first annual issue number 1 of the second volume of Marauders from 2022, he also probably won't be seen again if you haven't seen him yet. This is because Brimstone Love perishes, or at least is believed to have perished, as of the end of the Marauders run, issue number 12. That Marauders run, volume 2, not the first volume. He has a really great design, and his sadism was interesting to see, especially in one who is so strong in his convictions.